Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Promised Neverland video. In this one I'm going to be reviewing a part of volume 5 of the manga. So to explain I suppose why I'm doing this, the previous Promised Neverland content you would have seen on my channel is that I reviewed the first season of the anime, all of the episodes, and I've made the decision at this point to basically continue reviewing The Promised Neverland, but sort of switching over to the manga. So what we're going to be doing is picking up from where the first season of the anime left off. We're going to be reviewing the volumes that are out so far. Then I'm going to go through sort of the chapters that haven't yet been released in volume form in an effort to catch up to where the weekly chapter releases are, with the aim, of course, of eventually, picking up, reviewing the Promised Neverland chapters as they're released, basically every week. I've been wanting for sort of a while now to pick up and do one of the kind of manga series that has a weekly release and do that on my channel. And at this point I pretty much decided that The Promised Neverland is the series that I want to do that with. So the aim of this is to get towards reviewing one chapter a week of The Promised Neverland, so we're up to date with it and going along with it. So that means we have to start off kind of a third of the way into volume 5 to pick up with where the anime left off. So this, of course, as I said, is volume 5. It's called Escape. And the chapters that the end of the anime covered were the first 3 chapters of this volume, chapter 35, 36, and 37, Action Part 4, Action Part 5, and also Escape. So the chapters that we're starting off with here in terms of the new content, the content that Season 2 of the Promised Neverland anime is going to pick up with, it's going to pick up with starting with chapter 38. So the chapters we're talking about today are chapter 38, Forest of Vows, chapter 39, Beyond Expectations, chapter 40, The Snakes of Alva Pinera, chapter 41, Attack, chapter 42, We Won't Be Eaten, and finally chapter 43, 81194. So that is 6 chapters here out of a 9 chapter volume that we're covering here. That's new content. And I suppose just getting straight into it, my overall thoughts on the start of the basically, continuing the escape. This is, I suppose, the pursuit section of the arc. They've accomplished the escape. Now here's the kind of running away kind of bit, figuring out what's on the outside world. So how did they start it off? I feel it's a little slow. That's ultimately what I'd say. I think it gets towards the end of the volume having some interesting points, but these 6 chapters I think are a little slow compared to where it was. Like, it was such an intense finale with what happened and how suddenly it happened with Ray being kept in the dark and just everything happening at once, and you thought they were in this awful position, but then they managed to escape, and it works perfectly in part because basically everyone else accomplished so much. It wasn't just all on Emma, Norman's planning, or Ray. It was like the other characters who got so much of this done, and that's what kind of allowed this to happen. Here it's slower, and you sort of understand to an extent in that the, I suppose, adrenaline of the initial escape is sort of calming down. They're suddenly having to deal with, they're not living in this house, because while they were planning the escape and there was all this intense stuff happening, they fundamentally were living in a very nice house, so there was no worries. Here they're on the outside, so they're sort of catching their breath at the start of this. I just feel that the initial issues that they sort of deal with at the start are a little lighter. They're not as intense as maybe they could be at the start, and it does take a little bit to, I suppose, properly get going. But let's kind of jump in here. Obviously chapter 38 is kind of where we start with, and the immediate thing that we start off with is just kind of Isabella taking full responsibility with the the demons for what happened. And just that they're sending a party after them at once. It said that they confirmed footsteps along the northeastern bank. This is later referenced in later chapters, that they put out fake footsteps going off in one direction to give them a better chance to escape. And of course, Isabella, we know, helped them to escape as well by getting rid of the sort of, ropes basically that they used to kind of get across the kind of cliff that they had to get across. And of course, the 15 that have escaped. It said, 2 of the highest grade, 6 low grade, 3 average, 2 good, and 2 fine. So, there's a lot of good merchandise from their perspective out here, and they want to make sure they get them back because at least 2 of them are the absolute highest grade and they can't lose them. So, that's just the setup that they are being followed. They haven't gotten away completely freely. And the result, as we sort of saw from the end of the anime, is that the immediate environment that they're in is this, primeval forest. It's just getting across the idea that what they're in is somewhat similar, but is fundamentally different than what they expect. They have some knowledge of what the human world is like from the books that they've read. But this is different. There is something very different than this. The plants that they see here, the wildlife that they see here, is nothing that they know of. So this brings them to the conclusion that the world on the outside, at least where they are right now, is a sort of demon-run world. That the demons have sort of changed the environment to be more like them. So it's, I suppose, the demon kind of native plants, demon sort of fauna and stuff like that that's happening here. And you just start off fairly lightly of just them taking a break, having breakfast, and kind of Emma reflecting on, this is their sort of first breakfast together as a group, truly free, but the aim, of course, is to get something like they had before, but without the sort of fear that they're going to be, taken away and eaten. That ultimately Emma sort of wants to have a house for this whole group of them, but kind of run themselves free. That's the aim. She also mentions here that she wants to go back and get Phil and everyone else as soon as possible, but to do that they need to first, complete their escape and be prepared to actually go back in there and have the information they need to get all that stuff done. I think the first, I suppose, big notable stuff is Ray and what they do with him at the start of this kind of chapter. And basically acknowledging what he was like during the finale, in that he was really just kind of pushed along in everything that happened. It shocked him that Norman had thought out the plan this much. And the fact that it was accomplished so well, and basically he had very little to do with it, in terms of the plan actually executing as it was, he is incredibly surprised that it all happened. And it's playing off the fact that he was willing to sort of kill himself to make this happen, but Emma has more or less accomplished it in a kind of more realistic way. And he kind of reflects on the fact that he was willing to leave them behind, and they still care about him even though he doesn't deserve it. And he decides at this point that he's going to live and protect the family, everyone in this family, just like you. This time for sure, I vow, no matter what happens, I'll never abandon them again. And, they just agree that they're going to do this together. So this is a notable one in that it is this sort of change of pace for Ray he's taking on some of the idealism of Emma because, I suppose, of, in a way, the sort of dark nature of part of what he was almost trying to do, of just, no, only a handful of us should escape. We'll leave everyone behind. It's the only realistic way to do it. And what actually has caused them to escape is everyone doing it together. You saw in the finale of the anime how impressed he was by, of course, Dawn and Gilda, but all of the other, kids that they've escaped with, how successful they are in executing these sections of the plan. And we get a little scene with that as well here, where they're running away from the kind of big giant demon beast animal thing, and he's super impressed with how organized their sort of escape running is. So it's just a nice kind of thing to sort of get Ray sort of back on track and focused again, and that he's super on board with Emma now, and in a way the two main characters, the two main leaders, are back. But what they've accomplished with the escape happening as it did is that everyone here, everyone that's escaped, has, you know, talents and skills of their own. And then we get the explanation of the pen, which I suppose the anime ultimately didn't focus on the whole William Minerva thing all that much. It mentioned it, but it didn't go as in-depth as the anime had before now, so I assume the early episodes of Season 2 are going to have to delve into a lot more detail on the whole pen thing, kind of like they do here, but also explain a little bit more beyond that. And Emma's just kind of confirming that we're going to point B06-32 to see Mr. Minerva, and Ray kind of needs an explanation about that, and we get here that this was the pen that was left by Sister Crone for Norman, and it had that marking on it, as well as the fact that the pen itself, you know, when it's activated, sort of ends up sort of revealing this as we get a little bit later on. And another thing with this is, I suppose, there's a couple of minor kind of cliffhangers, like, oh, is everything gone completely wrong straight away? Like, someone disappears. Wait, everyone's disappeared. No, actually, they just sort of fell through some vines into this section where there's like these vampiric trees, and you know, this plot is like, it's all right as like a first kind of issue that they deal with. It's just not the most entertaining thing to kind of read through as like your first section of what's going on here, because very, very quickly, in just a handful of pages, it's like, oh, we found them. Everyone's here. We're just underground now. And it's just setting up this kind of new environment, and this is basically where you get introduced to the fact that you know, there's all these bugs and plants that are completely different than anything that they know about, and this prompts everyone to ask the question of what happened, what is going on in the world right now, and you know, or did this ecosystem rapidly change because of the demons? And that seems to be the sort of implication here of that, you know, the demons have their world, and there is some sections of the world that is human-like, and what exactly that means. And I suppose it's basically asking the question almost, what are the demons? Because there's enough similarities to stuff that you would make you believe that they're not like entirely like just an alien species, but enough differences, like what actually is going on here. And that's ultimately, I suppose, the main mystery in the show overall is, how did it go from being a human world, where did the demons come from, and so on. And yeah, they just set up the whole idea that you ultimately need to get to Mr. Minerva. The whole thing with the vampiric vines, it's all right. Of just like, it's just a simple solution in the end that they read from one of the other books that sort of has the kind of coded stuff from Mr. Minerva, that once they don't touch the like ends of the kind of roots, they won't get attacked. So once they're, you know, careful about what they're touching and stuff like that, they won't actually get attacked and injured in all of this. It is a nice setup of like that the books have sort of become this coded survival guide for the world outside, and there's way too it's not just a coincidence. This is actually what it is. It is this coded book that is made to read like an adventure story, but it is actually this, you know, manual for surviving the outside world. And Ray is skeptical about it initially, but ultimately comes to kind of accept that this is the case. And the solution is ultimately that all they have to do is climb up the branches, create an opening in the top of basically what they fell through, and then the cold comes in, and these vampiric vines basically stop functioning once they're hit by the cold. And that's really it for this little section. And they kind of retroactively find out as well that, yeah, you can't really go into this sort of underground cave system except during the winter when the vines aren't active. It's around this time we get explained the whole coordinate system with the whole B0632. And it's just like, it, you know, ultimately it's an overly important thing to get explained, but it's nice that we do get it. And then it's here when I suppose the action at the end of the volume happens, and the kind of giant demon beast kind of comes in to chase them. And this is kind of what really starts a lot of the, I suppose, important stuff in the volume actually happening here as they escape. This is where Ray kind of notes how impressive everyone is in terms of the organization of how they go about escape and running away from the demons, that it's not just this mad dash for survival. There is actually this kind of plan of like, you have specific leaders within the group and they all go in separate directions. That way the whole group isn't just being followed by if there's only one pursuer, you know, what's the point in everyone just sticking together and so on. So if they split up, it immediately, you know, saves more people. And you know, there's a thoughtfulness about, you know, what terrain they're going through and so on, that they're not just giving up and running away. It's actually somewhat tactical. But they kind of soon realize that like everyone's really tired after what's happened with the escape. They're going to have to do something about this. They can't just run forever. And this is where Ray, I suppose, takes this as his opportunity to sort of repay the favor in a way of like, they ultimately helped him to escape. They believed in him when he was willing to sort of like sacrifice himself for the escape plan and, you know, was almost willing to leave people behind. He's going to solo distract this beast while everyone else goes away. He's going to act as the sole kind of decoy in all of this. And eventually Emma agrees to it, but as he runs away, suddenly the beast's kind of head is cut off. And this is the first of the big kind of cliffhanger twist right at the end, and that is that the actual demons that are hunting after them have found them. So we have one of these more humanoid kind of intelligent demons, plus one of the more beast-like ones, but it's sort of in control. And this is more or less where we get the idea that, yeah, there are kind of like demon animals as well that kind of have the same sort of mask-like things, but they're still under the control of the more humanoid demons as well. And yeah, it's an impressive kind of standoff here, as you know, the demons are super confident because they don't really expect much from these escapees. It's very much the case of like, you know, the demons feel their demon species is just above humans. They only see humans as food, and so, you know, there's very little respect kind of given here. And Ray still kind of hides out because there's a little bit of distance between them, but he has to come up with a plan here about what exactly to do. He kind of temporarily panics in all of this, but then kind of analyzes what they're saying and comes to the conclusion that he's not the demon that he's facing here isn't onto the fact or like aware of the fact that there are more than him out there. So Ray is the only escapee that this demon has found, and he wants to keep it that way, so that he's not aware of the others to go after them. So he decides to come out of cover. He reveals specifically his number. That's why the last chapter is called The Number. And this is how he ultimately, I suppose, acts as the perfect decoy in this situation, because he is one of the, you know, highest grades. So of course this would take the full attention of this kind of hunter here. And Ray lies here and says, "You're too late, everyone already died," but he's happy enough just to have a high grade here. And we end with just the fact that Ray is running away from the kind of demon hunter and his beast as we cut over to what the others are doing. And what we get here is just that everyone notes that Ray's been gone too long. Ray does leave a little note behind that he basically says, like, what does he write on the tree? He writes, "Go to B0632 pursuers," with the idea of just letting them know that he's been pursued more than he expected to. I'll meet up with you there. And he just goes on ahead. When we cut back to Emma, she actually collapses. And obviously the idea is that the way she took out her kind of transmitter thing in her ear, she actually chopped her full ear off. And they make a point of that earlier on in these chapters, that, you know, Ray says, you know, you wouldn't have had to lose your ear. So the others have more actually just surgically removed it, whereas she had to keep the show that kind of kept Mom distracted, actually cut her ear off. And so the wound opens up again. She kind of collapses out of exhaustion and the injury. But just as it seems like things are about to go wrong, someone appears out of nowhere and tells them to come this way. And what's notable here is that the face isn't shown at all. But this person is obviously out here, someone intelligent, but we don't know the full scope of this, and is apparently going to lead them to safety. And the big question is, like, should they trust these people or not? Is it just a demon out to trick them in some way, or can they actually trust this person? And obviously I have read up to volume 9, so I know what's going on here. This is definitely, I think, the most interesting plot point that happens in all of this. And where they go with this little plot point here, I think is really, really well done. So yeah, that's volume 5. Like I said, it's a little slow to start off with. I think the chapter or two focus on just the kind of vampiric vines. It's fine to start off with, but it's not super ideal. Again, like, what way exactly could they have done it to keep it on the same level as the actual escape at the end of the first season? But still, you can always expect a little bit more in these situations. But they managed to get to a nice point. I think Ray definitely stands out as kind of being the star of these handful of chapters, with his kind of declaration that he is going to protect everyone as best as he can, and sort of make up for the way he was just prior to the escape and what everyone did for him in, I suppose, getting him out of there without him needing to sacrifice himself. And then, of course, how he handles the escape from the beast and then being confronted by an actual demon. That's the big thing going on here. Plus the whole, I suppose, mystery of they're heading for this place that William Minerva has kind of told them to come to. What is the deal with William Minerva? Who is he? How does he have all this information? Why is he kind of sending this information, like, in such a careful and subtle, secret way into the house? What's he trying to accomplish here? Obviously, the idea is to gradually inform the most intelligent of the kids as to what is going on, about the truth, and give them some hope for, safety out here. But, what is the full story of that, and what will they find when they get to that coordinate? And are they going to get there sooner rather than later? It's still like early enough in the story where you're borderline asking the question of, like, is getting to that coordinate going to be like one of the series' long-term goals, or is that something that is actually going to be happening, like, fairly soon? Like, is that like where the finale of the series is going to take place, or is that like the finale of this arc? It's kind of, you're asking those questions right now because the series has just changed basically from basically just being set in the one house to now being out in the open and basically being open to do anything that they want to do. So the scope and scale of the series changes with this kind of section of the arc, and now they can basically do whatever they want going forward. And so, is getting to that point this massive thing, or more of a short-term goal? Like, obviously the long-term goal is to come back, get Phil and the others out, and ultimately establish, I suppose, from Emma's perspective, a house along similar lines to what they had, just kind of one run by themselves, in a way. So that's the kind of long-term goal of the series. And yeah, obviously it is just the initial start of the arc, and I think that's the important thing, I suppose, to have here in terms of context, in that as much as it is a direct continuation, it happens in the middle of an arc, in the middle of a volume, the after escape thing is the start of a second arc. So of course there is a build-up section at the start. It's just that I suppose, from my perspective, a show that I really like is Prison Break, and fundamentally the format here is the same. The first season of Prison Break is the escape from the prison. The second season is them on the run on the outside. I personally felt like, Prison Break, as an example, did a better job at, like, the initial, end with the immediate escape from the prison, everyone's out. where do you start from in the second season, and it's kind of more intense there, whereas it kind of slows down a bit here and could be better. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Volume 5, at least the newer stuff, Season 2 stuff from Volume 5. My aim is to probably, in terms of while we're still dealing with the volumes, do one a week, and then I'll see, once I catch up with the English release of volumes, how many chapters I'm going to do each week. So, you know, we're probably going to be a couple of weeks before we catch up with the weekly releases. But, you know, that's the kind of journey I suppose I'm committing to here. So, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on the start of the On the Run arc here, basically, in the forest, on the outside of the house. What were your thoughts on what they did here? The focus on Ray, the, I suppose, reveal of what the world outside is like, and so on. Let me know, and let me know your thoughts on potentially how I should do the format of this series, all that sort of stuff. I want to see what you guys want in terms of my coverage of the manga of The Promised Neverland. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.